Madhava Jaya Kunja Bihari Jaya Gopi Janavallabha Jaya Girivaradhari Jaya Girivaradhari Jaya Gopi Jaya Gopi Janavallabha Jaya Girivaradhari Jaya Girivaradhari Jaya Gopi Jaya Yashodanandana Jaya Bhaja Janaranjana Jaya Yashodanandana Jaya Bhaja Janaranjana Jaya Yashodanandana Jaya Bhaja Janaranjana Jaya Yashodanandana Jaya Yamuna Tiravanachari Jaya Kunja Bihari Jaya Kunja Bihari Jaya Yamuna Tiravanachari Jaya Kunja Bihari Jaya Kunja Bihari Jaya Yamuna Tiravanachari Jaya Kunja Bihari Jaya Kunja Bihari Jaya Yamuna Tiravanachari Jaya Kunja Bihari Jaya Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Jaya Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Jaya Radha Madhava Jaya Kunja Bihari Jaya Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shri Vasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shri Vasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Govardhan Hari ki, Shri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu ki, Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam ki, Srila Prabhupada ki, Shri Gaura Premi. Hare Krishna, everyone. Thank you all so much for joining us this morning and for this opportunity to serve. We're going to be reading from Canto 4. This is chapter 19 called King Prithu's 100 Horse Sacrifices. And we're reading from texts 4 to 7 because there's only a purport in text 7. So for the first 3 verses, I'll read and then we'll all read together in text 7. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Okay, so let's start with text 4. Anvito Brahma Sarvabhyang Lokapalai Sahanugai Upagiyamanu Gandharvair Munibhishapsaro Ganai. And the translation is, when Lord Vishnu appeared in the sacrificial arena, Lord Brahma, Lord Shiva, and all the chief predominating personalities of every planet, as well as their followers, came with him. When he appeared on the scene, the residents of Gandharva Loka, the great sages, and the residents of Apsara Loka all praised him. Text 5. Siddha Vidya Dhara Daitya Danava Guhyaka Dayaha Sunanda Nanda Pramukha Parshada Pravara Harehe. And the translation is, the Lord was accompanied by the residents of Siddhalok and the Vidyadhara Lok, all the descendants of Diti, and the demons and the yakshas. He was also accompanied by his chief associates, headed by Sunanda and Nanda. Text 6. Kapilo Narado Datto Yogeshaha Sanakadayaha Tam Anviyur Bhagavata Ye Cha Tat Sevanot Sukhaha. And the translation is, great devotees who are always engaged in the service of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, as well as the great sages named Kapila, Narada, Dattatreya, and masters of mystic powers headed by Sanaka Kumar, all attended the great sacrifice with Lord Vishnu. And now we'll read together text 7. Yatra dharma dugdha bhumi sarvakama dugha sati dogdhi smabhipsitan artan yajamanasya bharata. And the translation is, my dear Vidura, in that great sacrifice the entire land came to be like the milk-producing Kamadhenu, and thus by the performance of yajna all daily necessities for life were supplied. Okay, so you can all repeat after me. Yatra dharma dukha bhumi sarva kama dukha sati dogdhi smabhipsitan artan yajamanasya bharata yatra dharma dukha bhumi sarvakama dukha sati dogdhi smabhipsitan artan yajamanasya bharata yatra dharma dukha bhumi sarvakama dukha sati dogdhi smabhipsitan artan yajamanasya bharata. Would anyone like to read? Yatra dharma dukha bhumi sarvakama dukha sati dogdhi smabhipsitan artan yajamanasya bharata. Yatra dharma dukha bhumi sarvakama dukha sati dogdhi smabhipsitan artan yajamanasya bharata. Okay, so then we can read word by word in translation. Yatra, where, dharma dugha, producing sufficient milk for religiosity. Bhumi, the land. Sarvakama, all desires. Dugha, yielding as milk. Sati, the cow. Dogdhisma, fulfilled. Abhipsitan, desirable. Artan, objects. Yajamanasya, of the sacrificer. Bharata, my dear Vidura. And you can all repeat as well the translation. This translation and purport by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Sri Prabhupada. Sri Prabhupada ki. My dear Vidura, in that great sacrifice, the entire land came to be like the milk-producing Kamadhenu, and thus, by the performance of yajna, all daily necessities for life was supplied. The purport. In this verse, the word dharma dukha is significant, for it indicates kamadhenu. Kamadhenu is also known as surabhi. Surabhi cows inhabit the spiritual world, as stated in the Brahma Samhita. Lord Krishna is engaged in tending these cows. Surabhir abhipalayantam. One can milk a surabhi cow as often as one likes, and the cow will deliver as much milk as one requires. Milk, of course, is necessary for the production of so many milk products, especially clarified butter, which is required for the performance of great sacrifices. Unless we are prepared to perform the prescribed sacrifices, our supply of the necessities of life will be checked. Bhagavad Gita confirms that Lord Brahma created human society along with yajna, the performance of sacrifice. Yajna means Lord Vishnu, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and sacrifice means working for the satisfaction of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. In this age, however, it is very difficult to find qualified brahmanas who can perform sacrifices as prescribed in the Vedas. Therefore, it is recommended in Srimad Bhagavatam, Yagyai Sankirtana Prai, that by performing Sankirtan Yagya and by satisfying the Yagya Purush, Lord Chaitanya, one can derive all the results derived by great sacrifices in the past. King Prithu and others derived all the necessities of life from the earthly planet by performing great sacrifices. Now this Sankirtan movement has already been started by the International Society for Krishna Consciousness. People should take advantage of this great sacrifice and join in the society's activities. Then there will be no scarcity. If Sankirtan Yagya is performed, then there will be no difficulty, not even in industrial enterprises. Therefore, this system should be introduced in all spheres of life, social, political, industrial, commercial, etc. Then everything will run very peacefully and smoothly. Om Jnanat Mirandasya Gnana Shalakaya Chakshuranmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadam Mahyam Dadati Swapadantikam Namo Vishnupadaya Krishna Prestaya Bhutale Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swami Nityanamine Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pacharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschati Deshatarine Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasani Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Vanchakapatravyaschа Kripa Sindhubhye Vacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. Along with these prayers to our spiritual masters, I also pray for all your blessings, so that we can understand the wonderful message of these verses and this purport today better through our discussions. In this section, Maharaj Prithu has begun to perform sacrifices, particularly the horse sacrifice. It's a very prestigious sacrifice, and he is doing so with all of the bounty that the earth has yielded. You remember in the previous chapter, Maharaj Prithu pursued the earth in order to bring forth all the riches that she was holding from the people. Of course, she had her reasons, but since they had, although they were sinful, they had taken shelter of the Supreme Lord, now she had reason to give them everything that they desired. Right? They were going to use it for the correct purposes. So after receiving that, what did Maharaj Prithu do? He executed sacrifices with it. This is the way enjoined in scripture, that when we achieve the results of our work, we utilize it for sacrifice. This is very clear, and this process is called karma yoga. This is what it means. We work, we earn, and the fruits of our labor we use in sacrifice towards spiritual advancement. Because the ultimate goal of this material world is to get out of it. If we're only utilizing those fruits of activity for our enjoyment, we're going to remain in this world. We're going to be bound to it. So these sacrifices are taught to us so that we can get into the habit of becoming detached from those material things, from all material things. Right? By the good that we accumulate through these sacrifices, we can make progression beyond ignorance, passion, and then eventually even goodness, right, to transcendental goodness. This is a gradual process. So His Holiness the Dakshaja Maharaj was explaining that even though these acts of sacrifice as prescribed for different social groups are not exactly devotional service, but it can help us develop the right qualities that we can take to devotional service more easily. That we can remain in devotional service, having at least reached the platform of goodness through engaging in the suitable sacrifices. Krishna explains in Bhagavad Gita what those sacrifices are in the mode of goodness, so that we can at least try and elevate oneself to that level if one is not already engaging in direct devotional service to the Lord. And so Krishna says in the 18th chapter, acts of sacrifice, charity and penance are not to be given up. They must be performed. Indeed, sacrifice, charity and penance purify even the great souls. Right? And therefore Maharaj Prithu is setting this example. He is a great soul. How much more greater can you get if you're being empowered directly by the Supreme Lord? But he is engaging in these sacrifices to set the example for others, right, to do so. But the important thing about these sacrifices, Krishna says in the next verse, in the 18th chapter, we're reading verses 5 and 6. Verse 6 says, all these activities should be performed without attachment or any expectation of result. Because if we're expecting results or we're getting attached, then we're not being freed by the process of sacrifice. It's counterproductive. They should be performed as a matter of duty, O son of Pritha. That is my final opinion. So at least if we can come to this level of doing it for duty and not for any other reason, then we've attained the level of goodness, at the minimum level that we can reach in this through this process. And then when we do these sacrifices for Krishna, we sacrifice all the results for His service, then that is what Prabhupada calls karma sannyasa yoga, activities of karma yoga in devotional service, action in Krishna consciousness. So that's how all sacrifices can be dovetailed for ultimate liberation, right, for attaining Krishna in the end. So Maharaj Prithu is engaging in this particular yajna called a horse sacrifice. And it's a very elaborate, very costly yajna. Right? He's utilizing this great wealth that he's acquired in the right way. And this is real wealth, just a side note. Right? It's not paper money, which has a supposed value that can drop, that can be lost. Right? This is gold, jewels, right? Precious minerals, all these resources that were available to someone as advanced as Maharaj Prithu for use. And the kings of the time also had the ability to accumulate this wealth because of their great piety. So we remember when Maharaj Yudhishthira was engaging in these sacrifices, he sent his brothers off to acquire more wealth in order to perform the sacrifices properly, and they literally brought back mountains of gold. So we can imagine that the kings are already so wealthy, but they require literally mountains of gold in order to execute the sacrifice. And this is because so many expensive ingredients were required. Shri Shri Radharanath ki, Shri Garaj Govardhan Hari ki, Shri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu ki, Shri Prabhupada ki. Nothing that was used there was plastic. Let's put it that way. Right? Nothing that was used there was bought from the market, and it wasn't vegetable ghee. Right? Everything was of the choicest ingredients. And something that's also very significant is that all the attendant brahmanas, even if they weren't directly participating in the sacrifice, they were all given vast amounts of charity as well. They were actually your sacrifice is only complete if the brahmanas are satisfied. So that included giving them land, gold, right, grain, cows, so many things. So these sacrifices were performed on this great scale, but there were great results that were achieved in exchange. The demigods, the devatas, they're fed through the sacrifices. We actually feed them through the grains and the ghee that's offered in the sacrifice. And because of that, they supply on behalf of the Supreme Lord everything that's needed for human society. Right? Another famous verse, Saha yagyaha prajaha srishtva purovacha prajapatihi anena prasavishyadvam esha vostva ishtakamadhuk. In the beginning of creation, the Lord of all creatures sent forth generations of men and demigods along with sacrifices for Vishnu, and blessed them by saying, "Be thou happy by this yagya or sacrifice, because its performance will bestow upon you everything desirable for living happily and achieving liberation." So there's some very important points in this verse we'll return to, but for now, what we understand by sacrifice is that we take or what used to be done in the past is that people take the fruits of their activity, their finances, Marj, Pritu's wealth, they purchase the necessary ingredients, and then they use that to perform the sacrifice, to offer these grains and ghee to the devatas, to all the brahmanas who are performing the yagya and so on. And in exchange for this sacrifice, everything that the devatas can supply to humanity, sunlight, moonshine, air, rain, everything is provided. So, in particular, what is required for sacrifice is ghee, clarified butter. Ghee is one of the offerings into the fire. There's a few offerings that we can make, grains, fruits, foodstuffs. But ghee is ultimately the most important. And all those items that are offered into the fire are known as havi or havishya. Havishya or havya. So this havi, this ghee, is absolutely essential. And then that leads us to understanding how essential the cow is as well, because we acquire ghee from the cow. So we have an understanding that we benefit so much from the cow because we get milk products, and the bull can till the land and we can get grains and produce. But even more than that, we get all of these other elements that the devatas supply as well through the cow, because without the ghee we can't feed the devatas, and we can't get the sunlight and the air and the water and everything else that they supply. So the scope of what the cow gives us or brings to us is much greater than what we realize. And His Grace Patanjali Prabhu explained that very nicely in the class, that we get everything through the cow. Because when we sacrifice the ghee, that's how we achieve, as Krishna says, everything desirable. We get the results of all our desires through sacrifice, right? Through ghee. And ultimately, though, when we're feeding the devatas, we're feeding the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Actually, the fire is described as the tongue of Lord Vishnu. And what the devatas, what they get through the fire, what do they do with it? They offer it to Vishnu. They offer it first to him, right, as his servitors. And so therefore Krishna says, Bhoktaram yagya tapasam. Bhoktaram yagya tapasam. Whatever yagya, whatever austerities, sarva loka maheshwaram, everything in all of creation, suhridam sarva bhutanam, I am the friend and the well-wisher of all living entities, because I am the one who is ultimately the beneficiary of everything that you do. So even those sacrifices to them goes to him actually first. And it makes complete sense, because what is Krishna's favorite foods? Or what does he eat? The products of the cow. The products of the cow. So it's a very nice verse from the Chaitanya Shikshamrita. The translation says, "The abode of Krishna is full of bliss. His wealth is its fruit, flowers and twigs. His citizens are the cows. His friends are the cowherd boys, and his associates are the gopis. His food is butter, yogurt, and milk." All these products that we offer through sacrifice. So no sacrifice, no Vedic sacrifice can be performed without these things. Krishna is consuming these wonderful products in the spiritual world, and when he comes to do the work of God in the material world as Vishnu, then we, citizens of the universe, we perform yajna with these eatables that he likes having, ghee, butter and so on. And the Lord consumes it and he's pleased, and then the devatas, they supply everything that we need. It's a very nice system. So there's no trouble, therefore, supplying the Lord with what he likes to eat. He even provides it, actually. He provides the products by providing the cows. The cows descend from the spiritual world. The spiritual world is known as Goloka. It's the planet of the cows. And can you believe the abode of the Lord is not directly referring to him? It's not Krishna Loka, it's Goloka. And it's the planet of the cows. Right? Another famous verse. Chintamani prakarash sadmashnu kalpa briksham lakshavriteshu surabhirapi palayantam Lakshmi sahasra satasamrama sevyamanam Govindamani purusham tamaham bhajami. I worship Govinda, the primeval Lord, the first progenitor who is tending the cows, yielding all desire in abodes built with spiritual gems, surrounded by millions of purpose trees, always served with great reverence and affection by hundreds and thousands of Lakshmis or Gopis. So in this verse, Surabhi, the Surabhi cows, they're supplying all desire. And this is how Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur translates this. The Surabhi cow yields all desire. And he says in the purport of this verse, Kamadhenus, cows yielding the fulfillment of desire, they give milk when they are milked. That, of course, we have experience of. But the Kamadhenus of Goloka pour forth oceans of milk in the shape of the fountain of love, showering transcendental bliss that does away with the hunger and thirst of all pure devotees. So, distinctly he's speaking about the cows that give milk and the cows that give milk in the spiritual world. Right? So we'll discuss first the cows that give milk in the spiritual world. It's interesting how he describes that the pure devotees have hunger and thirst. What is that hunger and thirst? To serve the Lord. And that's the only desire of a devotee. So how does a Kamadhenu do that? It provides that milk, butter, these foodstuffs that we said that Krishna enjoys. But what's interesting about these foodstuffs is that it's a fountain of love. It's literally love. Something interesting about the foodstuffs produced in the spiritual world, because it's love, because it's literally love, there's no waste produced from that food. We eat in the material world, and whatever we eat, there's some degree of waste that's produced. But in the spiritual world, because it's all love, it's completely assimilated by everyone's bodies. And there's no waste produced. Right? We all know that Krishna eats love. That's all he accepts from our offerings. So the Kamadhenu is integral to that, because she's literally providing love in the form of her milk products. But Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur says, in the material world, the Kamadhenu is also here. That we can consider even the milk in the material world to be coming from a Kamadhenu, from a desire cow. Right? Dhenu is cow, and Kama is desire. Because just as we read in the previous verses, that through sacrifice, through utilizing the products of the cow, we can get everything that we desire. Everything that we desire in this material world. What does that make even the ordinary cows? Kamadhenus. They're also helping us to fulfill our desires. The importance, though, is what those desires are. And therefore, in this verse, it's described that the desire cows must be dharma dugha, sufficient milk for religiosity. Those desires must be spiritual. They must at least be religious. And then everything will be supplied. Just like we were saying, when the earth was not pleased with the behavior of people, then she withheld everything. Something we all have experience of even now. It's not that the Lord isn't supplying. He's an affectionate Father, and an affectionate Father supplies everything for all His children everywhere. But because we don't know what to do with it, just like the people were sinful at the time of Maharaj Prithu, then the material nature has to teach us a lesson. That's what she's there for. Right? In a way, we could say that Krishna's love and affection for us is not going to allow him to do that. So his external energy has to step in and do it for him, discipline us. Right? This is, Srila Prabhupada describes this, I think it's the 5th chapter of the 1st canto, that she's actually ashamed of that role, that she has to punish us. But it's necessary, because we know what we are as human society will just take and abuse and destroy. So we need lessons through the earth withholding from us. So it should make us actually stop and think, rethink our behavior, appreciate what we have and utilize it properly. Unfortunately, that does not always happen. But the lessons, they're quite obvious, they're quite clear. So when we use it for religiosity, when we use the milk and everything else, the results of sacrifice for the service of the Lord, then all desires are fulfilled. And thus, even the cows of this world are kamadhenus. The importance of what we read from the 3rd chapter of Bhagavad Gita is it's not just material desires, desires for things in this world. What does Krishna say? Performance will bestow upon you everything desirable for living happily and achieving liberation. It's not enough to just try to live happily here. We can't actually. And we know that there was a very happy situation when Maharaj Prithu was ruling, right? When Maharaj Parikshit was ruling, when Maharaj Yudhishthira was ruling. But like everything in the material world, eventually it comes to an end. That's just the nature of this world. It has to be temporary because it is a reflection of the spiritual world. So it has the opposite qualities. Right? These great personalities, even the Supreme Lord, they have to leave and go to the next spiritual, material universe to engage in their pastimes and deliver those beings. And so in their absence, everything degrades again. So we can live happily for that time that the Lord allocates to us in these bodies, but we must always have our eye on the goal. That the sacrifices, the execution of the sacrifice is not just to give us everything here, but it is to lead to liberation. Especially when we're executing the sacrifices entirely for the Supreme Lord without any desire for ourselves. So we see then that the cow is venerated very much in the ancient Vedic culture for more than just providing milk. If it was just about milk, then they could have venerated goats as well. Goats give milk. And in this day and age, they could be worshipping. There's a lot more usage of buffalo milk in India. We don't see buffaloes replacing cows as sacred. So it was a lot more than just what we're seeing in an economic way. It was that the cow is literally providing the foodstuff of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, both in the spiritual world and here. And through that sacred offering, we can achieve everything that we need in this world. So the cow is is not at all an ordinary agricultural animal. And Srimad Bhagavatam explains its divine origins. This is Canto 8, Chapter 8, texts 1 to 2. Shukadev Goswami continued, upon Lord Shiva's drinking the poison, both the demigods and the demons, being very pleased, began to churn the ocean with renewed vigor. As a result of this, there appeared a cow known as Surabhi. O King Parikshit, great sages who were completely aware of the Vedic ritualistic ceremonies took charge of that Surabhi cow, which produced all the yogurt, milk and ghee absolutely necessary for offering oblations into the fire. They did this just for the sake of pure ghee, which they wanted for the performance of sacrifices to elevate themselves to the higher planetary systems up to Brahma Loka. Okay, so it means that these cows that are actually on the planet today are the descendants of the Surabhi that came from the spiritual world through the ocean of milk to provide the foodstuff for the Supreme Personality of Godhead in this world. So it's quite nice. This cow literally came from an ocean of milk. So Srila Prabhupada says in the purport of the second verse, Surabhi cows are generally found on the Vaikuntha planets. As described in Brahma Samhita, Lord Krishna on his planet Goloka Vrindavan engages in tending the Surabhi cows. Surabhiya abhipalayantam. These cows are the Lord's pet animals. From the Surabhi cows one can take as much milk as one needs, and one may milk these cows as many times as he desires. In other words, the Surabhi cow can yield milk unlimitedly. Milk is necessary for the performance of yajna. Sages know how to use milk to elevate human society to the perfection of life. So this expertness was demonstrated by Maharaj Prithu as well, because he knew how to utilize the proverbial cow of the earth as well. Everything was provided in unlimited quantities. It means that the cows of this world, right, with their divine origin, if we know how to utilize them properly, they'll also give unlimited amounts of milk. They don't need to be subject to all the horrible practices of modern day factory farming, and all of the resultant impious results. And the cows just need to be taken care of with love, and their products utilized without motivation for the Supreme Lord, and there'll be no shortage of what they will yield. We see that Maharaj Prithu, being a devotee, he's teaching us in particular how we can utilize the products of the earth, right? Also a cow, and the products of the cow itself, not just for sacrifice like is described in these verses we read, where the sages were trying to use the products of the cow for elevation to the higher planets, right? Basically in the mode of goodness. He was taking it a step further and demonstrating how we can utilize the products for the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Bhakti. Later on we'll see that the Lord appears before him, and he's very pleased that Maharaj Prithu has demonstrated Bhakti. We know that he's venerated for administration, for showing how the Lord's power of administration and what an ideal administrator does. Right? But he performed all of these in bhakti, in devotional service. That's the significance. And in the same way, he also showed that sacrifices must be performed without expectation of trying to achieve the heavenly planets or any other material goal, any other temporary material goal that will keep us bound to this material world, but rather everything should be done as a sacrifice directly to the Lord without any material desire. So when we perform sacrifices in this way, then those sacrifices will lead us to self-realization. At least they did in the previous ages. That was the point or purpose of sacrifice. And through sacrifice, one became purified of one's material attachments. One became situated in, at least like we said, the mode of goodness. One achieved realization of self, of being spirit souls, what we call the Brahma Bhuta platform, and from there one could progress to devotional service. This was the practice in Treta Yuga. And in this age we find that it's very difficult to perform these sacrifices in the same way to achieve self-realization. We do still perform them because they're part of what we call the dharmic rites. Dharmic rites, they purify us for the next stage of life. We need purification, so we need the rites. So that includes the rites before birth. It includes the rites after birth. When one takes grains, has the hair removed, takes grains, goes to school, gets married, dies. Before each step, there must be these purificatory rites that are taken. But we know that they're not performed in the way that sacrifices were performed previously, not in these elaborate and instructive ways that were able to get people out of their material attachment and into spiritual realization. Yagyas of today are not able to do that. They're not being performed to the same standard. We don't have the same ingredients. We don't have the same brahmanas. We spoke a little bit about havi, about ghee, but we also need other components for the sacrifice to be performed properly. Right? The arena must be set up in a certain way. The atmosphere, the timing, the nakshatras, all these things must be considered. The brahmanas, such an important component. They need to be perfectly versed in the Vedic sacrifices. When we say perfectly versed, it means that they need to have first mastered the Sanskrit. And they need to be Sanskrit scholars first before they're Vedic scholars. When they have that understanding then of the Vedas, then everything from the meter, the Sanskrit verses are not just said, they're sung, and there's specific meters for each verse. It must be sung perfectly. The intonation, if you hear those who try to perform or recite mantras in that way, you'll hear the intonation of each word, each syllable. It's very precise, and it must be done perfectly. Not one mistake. One can already see how challenging that is, right? Without even considering the great amounts of wealth and charity that need to be distributed as part of this, right? To please the brahmanas. And I've seen some sacrifices where brahmanas were not happy. It's not very pleasant. Right? And your results are not guaranteed in that circumstance. So all things considered, the yagyas of today are not going to yield self-realization. What has been given, though, is a different kind of yagya. Krishna speaks about that. Right? Even before the appearance of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, Krishna had already told us in the 4th chapter of Bhagavad Gita about all the different kinds of sacrifices that there are. And these include, of course, worshipping the devatas. Right? This is the sacrifices that we're mostly aware of. But then there are those who, this is text 25, offer sacrifices in the fire of the Supreme Brahman. Right? They sacrifice all material attachments to become self-realized, and then they sacrifice the individuality by becoming one with the Brahman. That's a sacrifice. It may not require the fire as we know it, but that's also a sacrifice. Then in the next verse, Krishna says, some, meaning the unadulterated brahmacharis, right, those who are celibate students, they sacrifice the hearing process and the senses in the fire of mental control. They restrain themselves fully from all sense activities. That's a sacrifice. And the householders, they sacrifice the objects of the senses in the fire of the senses. So they engage in sense gratification, but in a regulated way. That's their sacrifice. Others who are interested in achieving self-realization through control of the mind and senses offer the functions of all the senses, right, the yogis, and of the life breath, right, in particular those who are performing pranayama, right, into the fire of the controlled, as oblations into the fire of the controlled mind, because the control of breath is so that we can control the mind. Having accepted strict vows, some become enlightened by sacrificing their possessions, and others by performing severe austerities, by practicing the yoga of eightfold mysticism, or by studying the Vedas to advance in transcendental knowledge. Right? To study the Vedas requires time. That's a sacrifice. But because the Vedas are transcendental knowledge, you can't actually get that knowledge just by sitting down with it. You need to actually become sense-controlled. It requires a lifestyle of sacrifice. Still others who are inclined to the process of breath restraint to remain in trance practice by offering the movement of the outgoing breath into the incoming breath. Right? These different breaths are actually maintaining the soul in equilibrium in this body. And one who masters pranayama is actually able to stop the breath so that life can be prolonged for yoga to be perfected. Practice by offering the movement of the outgoing breath into the incoming and the incoming breath into the outgoing, and thus at last remain in trance, stopping all breathing. Others, curtailing the eating process, offer the outgoing breath into itself as a sacrifice. All these performers who know the meaning of sacrifice become cleansed of sinful reactions, and having tasted the nectar of the results of sacrifices, they advance towards the supreme eternal atmosphere. O best of the Kuru dynasty, without sacrifice one can never live happily on this planet. In this life, what then of the next? So what are we going to do when we can't perform any of these sacrifices, really? It's quite challenging. So we have Yagyai Sankirtana Praye, Krishna Varnam Trisha Krishna, Sangapangasha Parshanam, Yagyai Sankirtana Praye, Yajanti Sumena Saha. Those previous yagyas, they can't be adjusted to us now. Those yagyas have been given at that time by the Supreme Personality of Godhead, but He can appear again and give us a different yagya. That's His mercy on us, one that is suitable to us, suitable to this time and age. Therefore He says that He descends repeatedly, right, out of His causeless mercy to annihilate the miscreants and to deliver the pious and to establish principles of religion. Because only He has the understanding of what we need to get back to Him. If you want to get to someone's house, then ask directions from the person whose house it is. You can't ask directions from someone who doesn't know Him. So the Lord Himself comes to show the way to Him. And a bona fide, an authorized sacrifice for this age that we can all perform, as Srila Prabhupada explains, is the Sankirtan Yagya, the chanting of Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. In particular, this sacrifice is rendered in congregational chanting. Sangopangasya, Parshadam, Yagyai Sankirtana Praye, Sankirtan. That we can chant japa, which is important for us to purify ourselves for Sankirtan, but the Yagya is Sankirtan Yagya. So this congregational chanting is a lot like the fire sacrifices which are done in the arena for the benefit of the entire population, universe even, like Maharaj Prithu is carrying out. And it is purifying for everyone in the same way that the yagya is. It purifies us of material attachments so we can develop spiritual attachment to Krishna and ultimately liberation. So we should never think that because there isn't a fire and mantras and so many, well, Maha Mantra is a mantra, but the Vedic mantras that need to be chanted by Brahmanas, right? The Maha Mantra is a Vedic mantra that doesn't need to be chanted by Brahmanas. That's the only difference. It is a Vedic mantra, but it's just very merciful. It doesn't need to be chanted by Brahmanas and in a certain way and by certain people and certain time. But the chanting will help us achieve the same results. The same results that fire sacrifices did without, right, the same kind of effort that we can't carry out. It still requires effort. It is a sacrifice. Right? We sit in the morning and we focus. We're focusing and sacrificing our attention, our breath as well. Right? His Holiness Ram Govinda Maharaj explained that chanting is also like pranayama, especially if you sit in the lotus posture with an upright back and you without deviation and focus and without getting up and moving. If you just chant as you're breathing, it's pranayama. So we're offering that breath to the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and then of course when we go out on Sankirtan, we sacrifice our time, we sacrifice sometimes there's some dangers. But the important thing is that we're engaging in the highest sacrifice possible in this age. So thank you all so much for your kind attention. Grantaraj Bhagavatam ki, Srila Prabhupada ki. Are there any questions or comments, corrections? Okay, thank you all so much. Hare Krishna.